welcome to another podcast edition of Psyched for Psychology. We are really glad to be here today. I'm here with Krista Overson.
Hello.
And Krista and I were just talking at our company here at Nystrom & Associates. We do kind of an annual costume kind of competition. And her clinic here really raises the bar every year. And so she's not allowing me to take pictures of her clinic and what they're doing. It's very intense.
It's top secret.
It is.
If this gets leaked, this could throw the whole thing for us.
Yes.
So.
And it is a fun time of year, and it's fun that people do like to get scared.
Yeah.
And I think I have to look this up. I think we did a podcast on the psychology of fear and why we like to do that. I got to look that up.
Oh, yeah.
But nonetheless, it is fun because we like to be scared, and part of it is it's like we're in a safe environment. We like to be scared, or we like to watch scary movies because it's a little bit like exposure therapy. We're exposing ourselves to something scary, threatening, where we feel vulnerable, but ultimately we know I'm okay.
Yeah, good call.
And so it's a fun time of year. And yet, in our work environments and in relationships with people, it's not that fun because we don't know if we can trust people. I don't know if I can trust my boss, my colleague, this person, that person. What were their motives, intentions? There's that thing on Sundays. Do you know what it's called where people get anxious on Sunday and kind of going to work?
The Sunday scaries?
The Sunday scaries. Yeah, is that the word? Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah, there's Sunday scaries.
They're
what are we afraid of?
Anticipating the week, right?
Yeah, what's the week going to have? And I think a lot of it has to do with trust. Can I trust the people I'm working with? Can I trust that people have my back? And there is that sense of vulnerability in our work environment. Very true.
Very true. Actually, when I think about the stress of everyday work life, and even actually in my personal life, I forget how much of it is based on my relationships and if I can trust people.
Right.
And that could be from your background, that, maybe you've had situations in the past where you had someone betray you, but not necessarily, right? I think this is a very human thing that we're always kind of trying to figure out who can I trust, who can't, who's untrustworthy, right? I think it's a survival skill for us as humans, right?
Well, I think it is. And we know, I think intuitively, how much we ourselves judge other people. We make judgments and we draw conclusions about other people. Yeah. And so we know how much we do that, and then we become very leery that, other people are probably doing that with me. And so we feel vulnerable, we feel exposed, and it really comes down to trust. Can I trust this environment? And it can be a work environment, it can be our home environment, it can be any environment where trust is not really readily present or experienced. And so that leads us to what we want to talk about today is related to an article by a guy named Paul Zak. Paul Zak wrote in the Harvard Business Review, The Neuroscience of Trust. Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, what does it all mean?
What does that mean? The neuroscience of trust. Well, we're going to talk about this today, and hoping that people that are listening can listen to this and apply it in their work environment. It doesn't mean you have to be a manager of people, because those who are being managed, whether we realize it or not, we're trying to manage our supervisor too. How do we respond? What do we do? How do I react?
Good point.
What's important to my supervisor? So intuitively, we are trying to manage them. And a lot of it comes down to trust.
Yeah, it does. And I think this will even be applicable for other relationships too, because we spend most of our time at work. There's some statistic we spend
60%,
massive percent of our time. Yeah, 60% of our time at work, but then the other 40%, is other relationships. So I think this is all good for that too. I definitely forgot. We were looking at this article and it was talking quite a bit about a chemical in the brain called oxytocin. And we've talked about that before, but I never connected it this much to trust. So this article is kind of explaining a lot of different things about trust. But basically to start off, it's a chemical in the brain, oxytocin. And it's also, so this this is a chemical that's also associated with sexual intimacy, right? Like,
right.
Is that...
Yeah, when people have sex, and we talked about this in the episode on pornography, taking a look at porn.
Yes.
And part of the reason porn is so powerful with people is because it's just like with sex, during sex, this chemical oxytocin is released. And some people call it the bonding chemical or the trust chemical, and that's part of the neuroscience of trust is oxytocin is released. And the difficulty and the damage really with porn, we were saying, is that people get this oxytocin released and they get bonded to pixels rather than people.
Person.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this you're right, this chemical, what this Paul Zak found in his research, plays an integral role in trust.
Yep. So it started off with rats, as you do.
All rats,
in research, right? And so he had cited a different study about how oxytocin was released in the brains of rats as a signal that it's safe to trust another animal. So it's like really been studied, and so I think he saw this and wanted to take this and say, like, okay, is this exactly what's going on with humans, right? And how would we measure that? So, of course, he set up a bunch of studies where the participants didn't know what was being studied, and they did a bunch of different things. But basically, they found that there are things that impact our oxytocin, and it absolutely is released when right after we make a decision to trust someone.
Yes, isn't that fascinating? So you don't have to watch porn nor have sex to get oxytocin. It's a great chemical.
Well, and this is so, I think, relevant too for loneliness conversation, right? And so we're probably going to have to do an episode on loneliness and oxytocin because the connection, if it's like the trust and the bonding and the connection chemical, right? It's like no wonder people want it. No wonder we feel depressed if we're too isolated, right?
Precisely.
We need our feel-good chemicals.
Wouldn't it be nice to sort of have it like in a pill form? You know, we'd probably abuse it just because that's our role. You know, I'm just thinking of those dogs that are a little bit reticent. You know, they don't know if they can trust you. You just
they're standoffish.
Give them a little pop a little oxytocin, and all of a sudden they think you're terrific.
Better.
Yeah, exactly. If only it were that easy, and if only we wouldn't abuse something like that.
I know.
Well, we do know what it is to have trust abused in our work lives and in our relationships. So it sounds like it's just a pretty simple fix, right? We just need to increase oxytocin somehow.
Right. Somehow, some way.
How do we do that? And maybe we could start like what gets in the way.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So what keeps? This is not rocket science. It's pretty simple.
Sure.
What keeps us from oxytocin is stress. So stress in the workplace. Anytime we have high stress, we are not going to be as productive. And so I know what Paul Zak did is he worked with the Gallup organization. And ironically, I didn't tell you this. I did some doctoral studies with the Gallup organization on developing engagement in the workplace, engagement with clients, because if they can feel engaged, if your client is engaged, not talking client in terms of therapy, but your client in the business world has a sense of engagement with you, they trust you. Yes. And so they're going to keep coming back. So
true.
I go to Wells Fargo and I feel like it's a therapy session. So how are you today? What are you doing this weekend? What are you looking forward to most?
Really?
And I'm like, I'm looking forward to getting this transaction over so I can go enjoy my weekend.
Thank you.
Right, yeah. But I understand the intent is to build trust.
Yes.
So that there's that sense of engagement, and I will likely have a positive association and keep coming. And Wells Fargo isn't just going to be about banking. It's going to be about someone I trust.
There you go.
And I'm going to be engaged.
Well, and actually, so this is reminding me of when I've worked for large companies, they send out an annual employee engagement survey. Right. Right, because they're trying to gauge the same thing. They're trying to say, like, how engaged are our employees, right? And actually, this was another piece of studies that there are companies with high trust, where the employees have high trust, and then the employees have low trust. And high trust companies, this is a little little more factoids before we get into how to increase trust and oxytocin. High trust companies had 74% less stress. So there you go with your point about stress blocks oxytocin and blocks trust, right?
It's an inhibitor.
High trust companies had 74% less stress, 106% more energy, which I'm like, whoa, they have extra energy to spare, right?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? I wouldn't have to drink so much coffee.
Right.
Yeah, I could just have a positive work environment.
Exactly.
But that is profound because just think about that. Just by trusting my environment, I'm going to be more engaged. I'm going to have higher energy. But if I don't, maybe that's part of why, at least contributing why we're so low energy.
Right.
So what else?
50% higher productivity. So that's a lot. So even just trusting, having a trusting relationship with your employer where you work, you're more productive by 50%, and then 40% less burnout. So burnout is not at all what it is for lower trust environments, right?
Right.
So this is so great because trust isn't something that you can necessarily develop over email. I'm theorizing.
I love that.
Because we rely so much on email and we rely so much on electronic methods, and it's so hard to convey. I think it's hard to build trust over those. We should do another study about that. How do you build trust over email?
And I'm sure somebody is researching it. And
I hope so. Yeah.
It's just a very fundamental issue that we're talking about.
Right.
How do people trust each other and why? Why do people do that? And it comes down to this chemical, but so we know what gets in the way is stress. And many of us know what it's like, not only to be in a high stress work environment, we know what it's like to be in a high stress home environment.
Good point. Great point. Yes.
So, and I would imagine that these studies are very similar for the home. That we would have more energy at home. We would have more productivity around the home. We'd feel less burned out by each other in the home if we had oxytocin. So, Krista, we got to get this stuff. We got to get the goods. Yeah. How do we get the goods? The oxytocin? Well, we tried to make this easy and did this all in words that begin with R. It kind of feels like Sesame Street a little bit.
It does.
Right. So,
what's the word or the letter of the day?
So we want you to know the podcast today is partly sponsored by the letter R. And so the first R word, and this is really what Paul Zak highlights in his article about the neuroscience of trust in the Harvard Business Review. And again, I really believe this applies not just to work, but to home and in all relationships. And the first R word is if we're going to increase oxytocin and thereby increase trust, we need to recognize excellence. And think about that in your own in work environment and think, do I really have that sense of engagement? Do I have a sense of trust?
Yes.
And if I do or if I don't, it's probably related to how much is excellence being recognized. I know a lot of people, a lot of companies say, we pursue excellence. Okay, great, we pursue it. When is it recognized?
I love that point. I think that is one of the things that is so important about, being a manager, and being a parent, because this to me is like connecting all these different dots, right? Because as a manager, you want to recognize excellence. As a parent, you want to recognize when are your kids following the rules that you've set for them / doing the duties that you've assigned to them. I think a lot of times parents tend to focus on when are you being naughty and not doing what I say, right?
Right.
And they completely forget to focus on, you did everything I asked for you today. I'm so proud of you, right? Or whatever the case might be. So workplace and home, it's like, and even with your spouse or your partner, right? Like you might get into a bad habit of saying like, you didn't take the trash out again, right? Instead of the one time they do it, you have to be all over it and be like, thank you so much.
Right.
You always,
And I believe John Gottman, one of the great researchers in marriage and family studies, really supports this too, that when we are giving that positive validation and feedback to each other, it's crucial. And that couples who do this more regularly are kind of high achieving couples. They're going to be much more happier and higher satisfaction if they are, it maybe to rephrase this, not just recognizing excellence, but validating each other on a regular basis. And I don't know about you, Krista, I find with my clients, they realize I don't do this very well, and it doesn't come naturally, and which speaks to the fact that we need to be very intentional about this, whether it's at work, whether it's with our partner or kids, whatever.
Yes.
This recognizing excellence and leading with validation is a very intentional, disciplined endeavor.
It is. Yeah. It's so easy to forget.
Right. And so I just thought about this too.
Yeah.
The door swings both ways. It's not just top down. It's not supervisor to employee that needs to be doing this.
Good point.
But how often do we actually recognize excellence with our supervisor?
Yeah.
I think we're worried, I'm going to be a brown noser.
Sure. Actually, there's that kind of cliche or whatever, like, you know, don't suck up or whatever. It's like, well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just expressing appreciation, or, hey, I really appreciated that, how you did that, or you always answer my emails so quickly, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I had my annual review, and I told my supervisor here at Nystrom, Sarah, I said, I so appreciate the autonomy that you give me. I don't feel like I'm micromanaged. And incidentally, we'll get to that in a minute, that's one of the other
yes, it is.
Oxytocin producers. So the opposite of that would be micromanaging. Should we jump to that
Let's
one?
do it.
I don't know if I'm out of order what we're going to talk about.
We can go in any order. We decide.
All right. It's our podcast. We get to decide. Exactly. I love that. Okay. It's a rare opportunity, it seems. So we talk about recognizing excellence and releasing people. That's something we kind of paraphrased from Paul Zach's article, Neuroscience of Trust. And releasing people, in other words, letting them do their thing.
Yeah.
And maybe their way. Ooh, that's hard.
Well, and I think, like you said about, you were giving some appreciation and recognition to your supervisor about, thank you for letting me do my thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, generally checking in, I know what's going on, but like, I trust you to do your job the way that you want to do it. And isn't that a good feeling? I know anytime I have had a boss or supervisor who lets me work independently, that decreases my stress markedly because it's not this feeling of like, okay, what are you doing? Are you doing enough? You know, it's like, when someone acts as if they trust you, I think that increases trust.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it does. And you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my clients said something absolutely profound. Ooh. Sometimes, our clients say the best things.
Don't they?
And this is someone who had overcome a prodigious and profound amount of trauma in her life. And she said, I said, wow, look what you've been able to accomplish. Look what you've been able to overcome. And she simply said, when you've got people who believe in you, you can actually change a lot.
Wow.
And that's what I said. That's exactly, I'm like, wow, wait a second. That was so simple and yet so profound. And that's great in therapy. Like when your therapist truly believes in you and sees capacity within you that you don't even see yourself. And they're not just saying it, but they truly believe it. You can start to believe that too.
Yes.
And so again, workplace, this is true. Therapy, it's true.
Yep.
Partners with kids.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. I have to expand on that a little bit when it comes to kids and parenting. So when parents, I think a common pitfall when parents are trying to teach their kids how to do something or get their kids to change behaviors, I think a common pitfall is they don't let them figure it out, right? It's like they want to let them, they want to so badly, but they also might be like, oh, they're not going to do it correctly, or they might, get their feelings hurt, or whatever the case might be. They want to be protective. And it's like, nope, you got to let them figure it out, right? So if you're going to give a directive or give more independence, you have to follow through and like really let them.
Right.
With the exception of safety, right? But like,
So helicopter parents
there you go.
really can be inhibitors of that oxytocin.
Right. And then the kid internalizes, I don't trust myself either, because the parent, they're taking on this, like, my parent doesn't trust me. Right. And the parent might just not trust the world. Right. It's not personal, but we know kids are going to take it personally because they have that developmental narcissism. Right. So anyway, that's my little side note on.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it made me remember something else too.
Okay.
When we talk about releasing people and trusting them, they know that they're being trusted. They trust themselves. And the impact of that is profound, because I remember when I was a pastor, I would be talking, I did this thing about masculinity and what does it mean to be a man. Yep. And I would have this room filled with men. And anytime I'd be speaking to a group of men about this topic, I would ask them, what you guys wouldn't give to have your dad look you in the eyes with all sincerity and say, I am so proud of you. And no kidding, every time I did that, 3/4 of the heads in the room immediately went down in sadness. And it just shows how much that grown men are still yearning for that feedback.
Yes. Just to hear those words, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it is. It's we talk about releasing people, and to hear those words from a parent, and in this case, like dad to a son or dad to a daughter, I am so proud of you. It does. It releases people. Like, okay, you trust me.
Right. You trust me because in your eyes, I'm doing the things that I need to be doing, or in your eyes, I'm living a good life, or right? No, that's a great point.
And we can say, parents can say this to others. And as a therapist, I'll say this to my clients. I'm not going to say I'm proud of you, because it's like, who cares if I'm proud of them? And it's kind of condescending, I think, to say I'm proud of you, because it sort of kind of puts me in a one-up position. And it's not even that I'm proud of them. I just have such deep respect for what they're doing.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it really impacts me, and I'm inspired, and I really respect what they are doing. And I'm just being honest, and I hope that it releases them too. Like, they have a sense of trust more. They get that oxytocin, and they feel like, okay, I'm released. I can keep doing this. I can trust myself better.
Yep, totally.
So we covered 2 of the R's.
All right, what else? What are the other ones?
Well, to recap, we want to recognize excellence. Another way of thinking about that is validate people. Validate. Next is release people. Give them autonomy. Show that we trust them. Show we believe them.
Yep.
And people also need to realize that there's a realization of goals.
Sure.
So, am I doing any good at all?
Exactly. They need to know what they're working towards.
Yes.
That's actually, this is so important too, because when I'm developing relationships with people that I supervise or people around the clinic, there's always been a lot of growth in the relationship when I'm able to convey to them, or back, they can convey to me, what is our goal here, right? What's our goal in this job, right? Like, what are the markers I want to meet? What are the things I want to achieve? And once we have that discussion, it's like, okay, now we have something we're working towards, right? But if it's just ambiguous, how can I trust someone to reach a goal that's too ambiguous, right? How can I convey I trust someone to reach a goal if we don't even know what the goal is?
Precisely, and that's why people give up.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And that's, we talked about burnout a little while ago, too, and that's, I think, what happens with burnout is we don't see any results. We think everything is futile. What's the use? So
this is going nowhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So we not just need to recognize when we're doing something well, we need to see what's it producing.
Yep.
And I think there's been studies of this by Gallup organization and the importance of this, because they're trying to help with employee engagement, and they found that people who might be working on an assembly line, they need a connection with what's the end goal. So if I'm doing riveting, or if I'm putting something together, an assembly line, and what's the end goal? And there needs to be some connection to that. And connection, oxytocin, I think there is a link there. Whereas if we don't see that, it's just this menial, meaningless activity day in and day out.
Exactly. And now we're back to the applications to family and parenting is when kids know what's expected of them really clearly. This could be on a daily basis. This could be on a weekly basis. You know, what's our goal as a family? What's our goal as a couple, right? Even establishing those things and getting really clear, I think, helps people feel excited. I think in this article by Paul Zak, they did talk about in work settings, too, that a group project that's achievable really helps with oxytocin and trust.
If it's achievable and they can see the actual results, that oxytocin will skyrocket. And that sense of connection and engagement with each other, it's kind of, you can almost picture everybody high-fiving, like, look what we did. You know, I think of sports, and we're in football season, so when there's a touchdown scored, you see everybody celebrating. Or on defense, the defense has like an interception and it's returned for a touchdown. They all gather together now in the end zone and they do some celebration together. Why? Because they've realized a goal. And you hear about this sense of camaraderie be amongst them as a team because of what is being talked about. I also think about in the military. When people are in the military, they're working towards specific goals and they talk about what they were able to accomplish together, and the bonding is so powerful from that. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and actually, when I think back through my life, this is the last thing I'll say about this point, but when I think back through my life, the times I've bonded the most with someone or a team or a group has been when I've done something incredibly challenging with them. Right? So like I traveled in college with a group and we traveled all around the world and it was amazing. But there were times it was extremely difficult to be so far away from family, to be in a foreign country, right? Like that's an example of I'm forever bonded with that group because of what we went through. So I'm connecting these dots too about how something challenging can lead to that bonding.
Right, yeah. Whereas if you just went to the grocery store to get oranges with them, not quite the bonding experience.
Right, exactly. Right, or if you run a marathon with someone, right? You're going to probably bond with them quite a bit because it's really insane to do.
It is. And I want to bring this to other contexts again, in terms of partners, relationship with partners, kids, etc. Work environment, because how many of us have had the experience in some environment where we feel I'm only as good as my last mistake? There's no goal achievement. There's no sense of I've accomplished something. I've done something well. And kids can grow up feeling that way at home. We can feel that way with our partner because our partner just never seems satisfied enough. In our work environment, we can feel I'm only as good as my last mistake. And so we need to show and celebrate goals that are attained in any kind of behavior we're doing. Otherwise, we're gonna burn out.
Yep. Makes sense why this Halloween costume contest at Nystrom is actually a really smart thing to do on the company's end, right? Like, it's a attainable, for some of us, goal.
So there's a little shameless self-promotion I'm hearing because you're listening to the reigning champion clinic here.
Okay, I didn't start...
I feel like you're rubbing this in a little bit.
I just have
Not
to tell you...
Not sensing the validation here.
I just have to tell you, I didn't start off that point intending to brag, but it brings together teams, right? It's like, here's an opportunity to do an end goal, an end product, right? You submit a photo of your team in your costume, right?
Yeah.
So
there's closure then too.
Yes.
There's closure. Exactly. Look what we did.
And it's the entire clinic, not just like, this team or that team, right? So
that's a great point. So really what it comes down to a lot of time is we're talking about relationships.
Yes.
And I don't know if we can overemphasize the importance of relationships. And at work in particular, it can become very much about the end goal. It can be very much about that. And so people are a means to that end. And I think what Paul Zak is showing and what I know Gallup has highlighted and others is that people are never a means to a goal simply and solely. People are an end in and of themselves.
Oh, I love that.
And when we do that and we prioritize people, the end goal takes care of itself.
Thank you. I'm so glad you know why I said thank you so emphatically. I've been thinking about how important it is for me to have time in my schedule as clinic director to talk with people. Right? Because I do so much emailing and I do so much messaging and all this different, and it's fine, right?
Right.
And I love to have the time in my day and week to walk around and actually talk to people. And again, I think that's why this relationships point, the 4th R, is so important. It's like it's hard to build relationships when you're so task oriented, when you're so, like, did you get my email and can you do this and whatever? It's like, how are you? Right.
Right. And I think, if anything, what we can take away from all of this neuroscience of trust is that if people are an end to that task, the task becomes paramount and people become burned out.
Yep.
And then the task is actually not going to be realized.
Right.
And then we just cycle through people.
There you go.
Whether it's in a work environment or romantic relationships, we just cycle through.
Yep.
Rather than, because we're using people really for our own end, to help me in my work environment.
There you go.
Or you're here for me in this relationship.
Yep.
Rather than I'm here for you, and how do I help you, and how do I serve you, how do I empower you, which is a big word in our mission statement. Yep. How do we empower people to become their best version of themselves?
Yes.
So it does come down to that. It's really hard to increase oxytocin without actively and intentionally developing relationships, and that takes time.
And I'm really glad we ended on that one and pointed that one out, because I do think in this day and age of we're doing more and more on our phones, texting, messaging, social media, we're trying to use those things to connect, and that's fine. And I think the face-to-face, like one-on-one relationship can get kind of forgotten about, right?
Right.
Because we're trying to do so many things and stay in touch with so many people. It's hard to do like a deep dive with anyone, really, right?
Right.
So,
yeah. So if you want to build trust, if you want to see trust happen, if you want that great chemical of oxytocin, it really means just trying to manage the stress, keep the stress low.
Yep.
Recognize excellence, validate people regularly, help people realize you trust them by releasing them, giving them a sense of autonomy, and celebrate goals and realize the goals, show the goals that are being accomplished.
Yep.
In other words, keep investing in relationships. And we do this in work, we do this at home, we do this in all of our relationships. We'll be a lot happier, and we'll have less stress, more energy, higher productivity, less burnout.
I always trust that you are going to do a great review at the end of any given episode. So thank you for that recap.
Another R word.
Another R word.
Which is what's sponsoring us today on our podcast, the letter R.
Oh, the letter R. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us on Psyched for Psychology, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.